Okay, so welcome everyone to this session today. All those who joined us here live, and welcome also those who are watching us live on YouTube. Thank you very much. And today's session is a special one. We have apparently one of the biggest names in paragliding. His beginnings are very humble. He started with hang gliding, 10 years in the British Hangliding Team, and
Yes.
twice the champion, and also won the Superleague in 1991. Humble indeed. So, and then he moved on to paragliding, again part of the British Paragliding Team, British champion thrice, and then of course became the world champion in 2007. As a designer, he was the founder member of some of the biggest names, Airwave and Ozone. He designed some of the best models there. And then he designed for Advance for 2 years before he opened his own BGD in 2012. As an educator, we all know some of the famous books that he's written, 50 Ways to Fly Better, the SIV Bible, and I've been a big fan of his articles in the Cross Country magazine, which have been regular. He's also the current APPI president. I've had the privilege of interacting and flying with him on 3 occasions. I think the first one was in an APPI seminar in northern East Turkey, and the second was in Greece on a XC exploration. And the third one was at the Asian Games, where he was the meet director and I was safety director. And I've picked up so much from him. And it's pilots, designers, and educators like Bruce who are shaping our flying world. So it's indeed a great privilege for all of us that Bruce has agreed to be here. And inside a very sweet man, as I know him, but in the paragliding world, Bruce Almighty. So over to you, Bruce. Thank you very much today for joining us. Thank you so much. It's indeed a privilege.
Thank you very much, Avi, for a great introduction. I think you said it all, more or less.
Not really.
It's part of my talk to introduce myself, but I'll have to skip over that bit, I guess.
Or I may have missed some. But we'd like you to talk a bit about yourself,
So I will start going with the talk which I've prepared. This is flying just directly above my house in the south of France. You can see the Mediterranean in the background, and there's a nice cloud street off to the right. And normally we get a really nice cloud street going directly from the takeoff all the way out to the beach. But normally you can't fly. Well, you can never fly out there because it's restricted airspace from Nice airport. This is me flying last year on one of the Cure 2 prototypes. We changed the glider a lot since this one. This one had, I think, 60 cells, and in the end we went for 74 cells. But most of my time I spent, every good day that's flyable, we go out and we test the gliders just over the office and over my house in Gourdon. So this is a picture from many years ago. This was World Cup in '97, I believe. This is on me soaring on the Great Wall of China, flying one of the very early supine harnesses there, really laid back. I think it's a UP harness. I'm flying the old Airwave XMX glider. But this is a quick summary of my history, which Avi already went through pretty well, covered everything. He didn't mention the couple of films that I made, instructional films, Instability 1 and Instability 2. But they're getting a bit old now, but I think they're probably still kicking around on YouTube somewhere. Both of them, well, Instability 1 was the first SIV video, and we actually had to make up the maneuvers when we made the film. So it was like the very, very first film about SIV. Another one I've got on there is the SIV Bible. This was a book about, it was a digital online book about how to do SIV and how to recover your glider. But this has actually been taken off, so it's not available anymore. I was trying to look for somebody to work with me on updating it, but so far I didn't find anybody. It was just getting too out of date, and the quality of production, things that are online, just improves and improves and improves. And when you look at something that's nearly 10 years old now, it looks just too out of date. And yes, I do the Icaristics articles. So, you know, I've got a massive amount of experience all over the world. And the objective today is just to share of as much of that experience as possible. And please ask any questions, just interrupt when you feel like it. And I will answer the best I can. So in order to know who it is that I'm talking to, I would like to try to understand how much experience you've got. So I guess I'm going to need to, if we can see, wondering how we can vote on this. If we can show your hands for how many people have been flying for more than 10 years. But I can put my hand up. Can anybody count everybody's hands? You can put a thumbs up. I think I have to go out of my talk to do a thumbs up. We're on to 42 participants now. So can anybody count? Can you count, Avi? How many people? Or roughly how many people with more than 10 years?
I can't see the people with the screen on.
I stopped the share then.
Yeah, now you can see.
Okay, guys, thumbs up, 10 years or more. Okay.
So
3,
1, 2,
4,
3,
5,
7.
and on the second screen,
6, 7,
8, 9.
8, 9. About 10, about 10.
About 10 out of
40.
we have 60 now, I think, because we have 2 screens full. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 50, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, and then the next one, between 2 years and 10 years. How many people, put your thumbs up if you're between 2 years and 10 years of flying? 1, 2, 3, 4,
5, 6,
5, 6, 7, 8.
7, 8.
8. So we had 10 and then now 8. So, and then the last category is people with less than 10 years flying. So that should cover everybody.
Yeah.
1, 2.
Should be the rest, I guess.
4, 5, 6. Doesn't really add up, does it? We're not too good on maths here. A lot of people have no video camera on. I guess that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like. So
I would guess the rest would be
6, 10, and 10. 6, 8, and 10, looks like. I would say. Just trying to get back to my presentation. Here it is, just being a bit slow there. Okay, that's good. So it's, probably about 1/3 each, I think. So this is the less than 10 years. So that's about 1/3 each. Interesting. It's a kind of nice spread between the groups there. So the topics for tonight, we start with some cross-country flying and thermaling, then on to SIV safety and accidents, and then thirdly, a section on design. So this is a video of the end of a competition. And you can see that everybody's landing really badly. Having flown Enzo 3 this week, I can understand the Enzo 3 is actually quite tricky to land. It doesn't like to fly really slowly, and it's quite hard to land well. I think there's also maybe the problem is that there's some tailwind, and so everybody's all forced to land in the same direction, and they're all landing downwind. But the purpose of that video is that what you need to do in all your flying is to try to always maintain the basics of the flying. So even if you're flying in World Cup, flying competition, flying cross country, you should always respect the basics of flying. So that's do ground handling, do top to bottoms, do soaring flights, and the peak of your experience should be the cross country. Because I meet a lot of pilots and they turn up on takeoff, and if the conditions is not fantastic, they don't fly. They give up, go home, or just wait around. But very often what I do is I turn up a takeoff, it's still not soarable, and I just do a top to bottom, because that's a beautiful thing to do for a start. It's nice to fly, but also it helps you with your own experience, because you practice takeoff, you practice a landing, and if you only do big 5-hour flights, then not much of your flying experience is going to be about takeoff and landing. Whereas when you do top to bottoms, takeoff and landing is often the hardest part of a flight. So you do really need to respect that and to get as much practice as you possibly can at doing top to bottoms, ground handling, and takeoff and landing. I don't know what your opinion is on that, Avi.
Oh, we run a big school here. I couldn't agree more. It's so essential to have solid takeoff and landing skills. That reduces, the accident rate to such a great extent.
Yeah, I think the main thing is just not to be snobby about it. You should always, just even a small little flight is still a great flight. And very often I go to launch, it's not very good. I fly top to bottom, and then I come back to takeoff, and all the same people are still waiting there on the takeoff, and they haven't flown. And, I've flown thousands of times, but I've still, I've flown and they haven't. So who's won? Who's had the better time there? It's really funny. And it's something that you should think about, just don't be snobby about flying. Don't only go flying when it's only great conditions. Go flying when it's not so great as well. Go flying in the winter as well. Go flying as often as you can, because practice really helps. Okay, and secondly, the most important skill in cross-country flying, of course, this is my own opinion. Anybody like to come up with a suggestion? What would they say was the most important skill for cross-country flying?
Thermaling.
Thermaling, yeah.
Thermaling? Oh, sorry, repeat.
Yeah.
Risk management.
Getting out of a sticky situation.
Sounds sophisticated. Yes, yeah. And in my opinion, it's observation. It's looking around and keeping your eyes open for what's going on around you. And when I mean looking around, I do actually look around an extreme amount when I'm flying. And because, you know, for instance, it's difficult to see what's going on above your glider. So I often, if the glider moves a little bit, then I'm able to look more up, and I also look behind me and down below me as well. This little video here, just an example of some of the looking around that I do. In this particular moment, I'm preparing to do a collapse. So before you do a collapse, you obviously got to make sure that airspace is completely clear all around you. And that's why I really, you know, have to look around a huge amount. But no, it's really extremely important observation. And what are you looking for? So first of all, you need to have time to look yourself. If you are a beginner pilot or somebody who's learned fairly recently, you don't have the time available to yourself to look around because you're busy controlling your own glider, and you're busy trying to just do the basic movement, the basic requirements of what's needed to be done when you fly. So, you know, just controlling the glider, making sure you don't get any collapses, staying out of people's way, flying in the right places. And it's only once you've mastered all these skills that you can actually begin to take the next step and spend time observing things that you need to look at for flying cross country. So it sounds very easy just to say observation is what you need, but it requires, you know, a lot of groundwork to able to free up your mind so that you can actually look at what's going on around you. I was speaking last week to Manu Bonte, and he said that what he does to try to encourage his pilots to do this is he tries to teach them to fly with their eyes closed. I never heard of this before, but I started to try and do it last week, and it's actually a really cool thing to do. So obviously you need to be flying far away from any mountains and any other gliders. But if you're thermaling, you know, clear of any obstruction, then you can just close your eyes whilst you're thermaling. And the idea behind it is that it just demonstrates to you that you don't need your eyes in order to fly and to thermal. You can thermal and fly completely automatically. And if you try it, you know, you close your eyes for 5 seconds and you think, oh, that's a bit strange. And, you know, you'll be a bit worried, you don't know where you are. And then you try it again and you do it for 10, 15 seconds. And then you do it for 30 seconds. And then quite quickly, you know, you can close your eyes for a minute or two. And it's really quite relaxing and meditating. And it just gives you the confidence that you can fly without concentrating the whole time on your glider or on looking at your glider. So then you can stop looking at the glider and start looking at other things going on around you. So flying with your eyes closed is a really nice trick from Manu Bonte. So what do you need to look at? Well, the absolute number one thing is other pilots flying. Because if another pilot is flying, doing something, then you can do it as well. So if another pilot is climbing, you can go over and climb with him. If another pilot is in the lee side or getting collapses or having a bad time, then you can stay away from that area. So, you know, other pilots is just the number one thing that you should be looking at. Second things to look at is the sky. So watching the sky and the sun, the clouds, the way things are changing, and even the shadows of the clouds on the ground. And above all, keep an open mind about what's going on, because sometimes people have a specific opinion about what's going on in the sky. You know, maybe they're a local pilot and they say there's always a thermal there. And what you actually need to do is look at the cloud formations and decide, you know, is the normal thing going on or is today different? And that's what I mean by keep an open mind. You know, you've got an opinion, there should be a thermal there. Keep an open mind. You know, you need to have a confirmation from clouds, wind, or a bird, or whatever that what you're thinking is actually going to happen. And so that's what I mean by try to keep an open mind. Here we have a view looking down from takeoff where I live. And just an example of so many things there are to look at when you're flying. You know, you can look at the clouds. You've got two nice clouds here. I can see that the cloud on the right doesn't really have a very clear cloud base, but the cloud on the left has more of a solid cloud base, so it's more likely to be lifty and working well. You can also see the wind out in the smoke out in the valley. On the left-hand side, that's the wind is coming in from the left, so that's an east wind. And then further off to the right, the wind is actually coming in more from the west. So that tells me that there's likely to be a convergence line, or a very good lifty area somewhere where those two winds are converging. And so when you're flying, you need to be looking at all those things and thinking about those things. And so it's it takes quite a bit of thought and reflection and and study to be able to look at the sky like that and to understand and interpret everything that can be going on. And then lastly, looking at other pilots. This is quite a funny little video. You're looking at this pilot and was filming. I was thinking, what is he doing? Why is he doing that? Is he hitting turbulence? And being in Gordon, we have 3 paragliding brands here. So this is actually a pilot testing the pitch reactions of a glider. So so you need to be looking at the other pilots. You need to be thinking, what's he doing? Why is he doing that? Is it something that can help me or something that doesn't help me? And when I'm flying, I like to try to really pay attention to all the pilots in the air, and especially any pilots that are doing something different. Because often you have, every pilot's just ridge soaring on the ridge, everybody's in the same place. And then one pilot, does something different, flies off south, off the end of the ridge. And then as soon as I see somebody do that, I just look back and concentrate on see what happened to him. And I look, every 20 seconds or so, I'll be looking to see what happened to that guy. What's he doing? What's he doing? What's he doing? And every time somebody does anything different in a whole group of pilots, I'm always on it and always looking at what they're doing. I mean, first of all, it's for a selfish reason that, maybe I learned some useful information about the weather or how things are going, but also it's a safety thing. The guy could get in trouble. He could land in a tree. Who knows what could happen? He could get a collapse, there's rescue. So you really need to, keep an eye on everybody else that's flying in the flying site and just, try to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And if it's something that's successful, then you can go and do it as well. If it's something that, if they just end up going down, then don't do it. So, looking at other pilots is really, incredibly important, especially in a competition where there are so many other pilots. I really can't stress enough how much this is important. I mean, when I speak to a good competition pilot, I would often, we've been flying, I would say, oh, did you see that guy? At 3 o'clock, he went to the south and did this and that. And if he's a really good competition pilot, you go, oh yeah, that was the guy with a yellow Q2 and you got up from really low and yeah, I saw it. But if you speak to an average pilot, they never even saw that anything happened or that anybody did anything different. And so it's often the difference between a good pilot and a bad pilot is just what they see. There's just always so many things going on in the air, and there's just a lot of things to look at. So it takes a lot of time and concentration, and it makes, you just have to make a big effort to watch those things all the time. So the other thing to look at is the sky. This is a time-lapse video taken in Brazil of a beautiful looking cross-country sky out in the flatlands. And one thing you'll notice is that the camera is obviously on the ground, and you're looking up and you're looking at the clouds, and you get quite a nice image of the clouds and everything that's going on. But when you're flying, you're obviously not on the ground, you're up in the air. Got a video here, another picture here. So this picture is taken from up near cloud base. And here you can't really see anything that's happening in the clouds because the clouds just look like a white line. And you can't see any patterns really or any of this hexagon theory, which I will talk about in a minute. But the purpose of these couple of slides is just to say that when you're low down to the ground, then you can look up at the clouds, and it helps you to plan your cross country and decide where there might be lift. But when you're high up, you need to look down at the ground and look at the ground shadows. So it's kind of the opposite. You're low, you need to look high, and when you're high, you need to look low. It's just an interesting observation. So I don't know how many of you have heard of the hexagon theory. It's one of my favorite topics. It's a way of predicting the way that clouds form. And the theory says that the clouds form around the edge of hexagons, and the side of each hexagon is on average 6 kilometers long. And if you've got some wind, then the side of the hexagon which is aligned with the wind becomes longer, and that becomes a cloud street. So this has a few interesting consequences. First of all, if you have a cloud street, it doesn't go on forever. It means that a cloud street will end at some point, and then you should go off at 60 degrees along the other side of the hexagon for 6 kilometers, and then turn right another 60 degrees, according to the hexagon theory. But it does help you, it helps you to not expect cloud streets to go on forever, and to give you an idea where the next clouds might be. But the other thing the hexagon theory says is that if the cloud base is low, the hexagons get smaller, and if the cloud base is high, then the hexagons get larger. So they might go up to 10 kilometers on each side if you've got a 3-meter cloud base, and if you go down to 1,000 meter cloud base, and the hexagons go down to 3 or 4 kilometers, something like that. But the thing that it really helps me to do is to see a pattern in the clouds. Because when you look at clouds like that first video we just watched in Brazil, it just looks random, it just looks like a random puffy clouds all over the place. But when you've heard of the hexagon theory, then you can start to look at the same sky and you think, oh yeah, maybe there are some hexagons forming there. And it gives you an idea that the sky has some kind of structure. So if we go back to that slide and look at it again, maybe you can begin to see that the clouds are in a kind of circular structure with a blue hole in the middle with white clouds around the outside. And obviously this picture as well, you've got this blue area in the middle and the clouds around the outside. So those blue areas in the middle, they would be sinking air. So that's areas not to fly in. And obviously you want to fly under the clouds along the edge of the hexagons. The other thing about the hexagon theory is that it's especially for flatland flying. So as soon as you get mountains, the hexagon theory breaks down, and because if you've got a massive mountain with the sun on it, then it stops the hexagon theory. You just get a cloud above the mountain. So obviously you can only use hexagon theory when there aren't huge mountains. So, but I mean, flying in India, there is quite a lot of flatland flying. It's not all up in the Himalayas, so I think it is quite applicable in India. Here we have another picture here, somebody showing where a thermal trigger might be. I think the most important thing for me here is that you can see that there's some areas on the ground where you've got clouds, and some areas where it's blue sky. And the main thing you need to look at here is you can think, yeah, this could be a thermal trigger that he's pointing at, but it actually looks like it would be a thermal trigger because it's right on the edge of the clouds. So it's in sunshine and it's right on the edge of the clouds. So it's probably along the edge of a hexagon. So if it was right in the middle of a blue hole, like at the top of the picture, there's a big area of blue, and also to the left, there's a big area of blue, then that area thermal source probably wouldn't work. But because it's quite nicely located right on the edge of this cloud shadow, I would say it's more likely that thermal source can work. So it can also give you an idea why a thermal source works sometimes and doesn't work at other times. You know, it depends on the positioning of the hexagons. Okay, that's the section on cross-country flying. Of course, we could carry on about cross-country flying for all day if we wanted to. Perhaps I'll take a little pause here, ask anybody if there's any questions about cross-country flying. Avi, what is the Indian distance record? You're muted.
I think like 240, 250, something like that.
And is the record in the Himalayas or out in the flatlands?
In the Himalayas.
In the Himalayas, okay.
I think we have a question as well from Faisal. Okay, Faisal, question. Go ahead, please.
Okay, great. Thanks, Avi and Bruce, for the session. Bruce, I'd like to get your opinion on how to increase the capacity to focus and enjoy a flight. Usually at the mark of 3.5, 4 hours, I start to get tired and exhausted and just want to land in most of the flights of cross country. So do you have tips that I can use really to extend that duration and go longer? I drink, I pee, but still I get tired at the end.
Okay. Yeah, I think it reminds me of a story of Darren Arkwright when we were flying on hang gliding competitions. He used to put an alarm clock on his hang glider, and at 6 o'clock it used to go off, and it would remind him that this is when the most important part of the task was at the end of the day, when everybody was trying to get into goal at the end of the day. And that was we used to do really long tasks, but now the tasks got much shorter. You know, I think an average task is 3 to 4 hours now. We used to do 6 to 8 hours every day in those days. Yeah, I would say that obviously keeping yourself hydrated is important. But I mean, personally, I don't pee when I'm in the air because I find it difficult. So normally I try to not drink much, but just drink, kind of just wet my mouth. And sometimes I eat some kind of slow release energy bar, something like a muesli bar or something, or bananas are supposed to be very good for that as well. I think also perhaps trying to relax during the flight is important also. Perhaps you could try this thermaling with your eyes closed, would also help you to relax when you're thermaling, and probably makes it more the whole flight more relaxing, so that you've got more time to reduce the stress and relax and enjoy the flight more.
Thanks.
So before we move to the SIV part, could you talk a little bit about, choosing the lines? So, how do you, see the terrain, or, how do you kind of visualize the, best line to choose in terms of the pressure, the, how the day is evolving, and depending on the terrain, like what gives you the hints to, choose kind of a good line or the best line?
Yeah, well, the number one thing is, of course, other gliders. The best thing is if you can be 3 or 4 gliders spread out, and then you all fly along with 100 meters between you. And some of them, if everybody's going up, one's going up on the right-hand side, then you move over to the right-hand side. So you just carry on, you cooperate in the flight. you know, by spreading out and then following the guy who's getting the best lift. So that helps a lot when you're flying on a line. Also, I find sometimes you get, I get the feeling in the harness quite often, you know, that there's a little better lift to the right-hand side. And then, so I just shift slightly to the right, start drifting off more to the right. And if it keeps getting better, I just keep doing that more. And then when that tendency stops, then I change my plan and do something else. And similarly, if I'm getting in really bad sync, then I just completely try to get out of there as quickly as possible by changing direction or speeding out of there. Those are really important things. I think the hexagon theory helps a lot. So looking at the clouds and trying to understand the patterns in the clouds and trying to plan where you're going to go, especially if you're below cloud base, you can look, whilst you're thermaling, it's good to look at the clouds around you, because once you get to cloud base, it's really hard to see the clouds around you. So you have to make the decisions of where you want to go next before you get to cloud base.
Okay, I think we have one more question. Viz, you want to go?
Yeah, hi Bruce. Bruce, could you talk a bit about cloud streets? You know, we are not very good at flatland flying here because we mostly do mountain flying. So could you talk a little bit about cloud streets and how you fly in the flats? What's the basic theory?
Yeah, well, cloud streets are, you know, really the easiest part of flying in the flats because it's just, you know, constant. You just fly in one direction and it's constant lift all the way downwind. The main thing to say is that between the cloud streets there is sync. The cloud streets also change the wind direction on the ground, which helps quite a lot to show you where the thermals are. So it means that, you know, if the wind is in one direction, then when you've got a cloud street, it will tend to change the wind by 20 or 30 degrees towards the lift, towards the cloud street. So often you get, so in fact, therefore, you know, a cloud street is almost a kind of convergence because the wind is coming in from both sides and giving you lift in the cloud street. Other tricks in cloud streets or in cumulus, just normal fair weather cumulus, is to stay on the upwind side of the cloud, or also the sunny side of the cloud is the area with the best lift.
Thanks, Bruce.
Okay, so we should.
Yes, please.
Go on to some SIV. This pilot is flying a very old glider, and you can see he launches well. Conditions are obviously very calm. He flies out. He puts just a very small amount of brake on, but the glider just seems to be slowing on its own and just dropping out of the sky in deep stall. So let's watch this again in slow motion. You can see the glider is just slowing on its own. The pilot makes a very small brake input. This is actually the worst thing he could have done. But the problem here is not really with the pilot. The problem is a glider which is too old and has gone out of trim. Okay, so I've put in this nice video about deep stall. Fortunately, this is something which doesn't happen too much nowadays. This video is, you know, at least 20 years old. And at the time, in fact, it's probably more like 30 years old. At the time, deep stall was quite a common safety problem. And as the technology and designs have improved over the last years, deep stall has become more and more rare. So it doesn't happen too often. But I often find that it's something which is missing in courses, and often people don't know what it looks like and are just completely surprised when they see a video like that, which they've never seen before. So what causes deep stall? Well, the number one cause is rain. If the glider gets wet, it can enter a deep stall. Second cause is the porous topsail, and that's one of the reasons why we check the porosity of the sails. In fact, the main reason why we check the porosity of the topsail. Third reason is line length, and the fourth reason is perhaps a weakness in the design. For instance, competition gliders are actually permitted to have a deep stall problem, and also END gliders as well. So there's I figure that an END pilot should be good enough to be able to recover a glider from deep stall. And you know, I don't think everybody knows that it's an accepted part of END gliders that they can actually have a deep stall problem which they don't recover from on their own. So it's an important point. So this is what the air is doing when you're in a deep stall. The image on the right is a glider flying normally with the streamlines flying over the glider in the normal way. So the wing is acting as a wing. Then on the left-hand side, the glider is just descending vertically through the air. And so the glider is actually acting like a rescue chute. And because the size of a paraglider, 25 square meters, is about the size of a rescue chute, you actually go down also about the same speed as a rescue chute. This is a pretty amazing video.
Знаете, какой дождь, ливень, а этот не скручивает.
Looks like Brazil to me.
Ёпти мать, падает, падает.
Impressive video, huh? So the guy is flying, obviously, in heavy rain, and the moment he puts on just a little bit of brake, he goes into deep stall, and he probably doesn't go all the way up with his hands, or he doesn't know the right way to recover, and stalls all the way down into the middle of the town here. So the first and most important thing with deep stall is to recognize that you're in a deep stall. It's not so easy because the glider just looks pretty normal above you, especially, you know, if you saw the first example that we saw, that purple glider, you know, it was fully inflated above the pilot. There wasn't much to see. There's no collapse or anything like that. The only difference is it's a bit soft, you know, a bit like because it's stalled. And the thing that really tells you you're in deep stall is your vario, because you can hear the vario screaming away because you're going down so fast. But if you're high, you know, you might not even notice that you're going down so fast. And the first thing you have to do is fully release the brakes to allow the glider to recover. And I think that pilot we just saw didn't look like he fully released the brakes. If releasing the brakes isn't enough, then you can apply accelerator to speed up the glider, and that lets the glider surge forward. And then you might want to put a little dab on the brakes to stop the surge. So in the old days, they used to say you could pull on the A lines, and this is also possible, but basically applying accelerator is the same as pulling on the A lines. It's just a little bit more subtle, because if you pull on the A lines and there's not much pressure in them, then you might pull on a big collapse as well, pull in a big frontal. So I think using the accelerator is a better option than pulling on the A lines. Has anybody got any comments or feedback about deep stall?
I don't think so. I think another mention about very small size gliders have also a little more tendency to go into deep stall.
Yes, definitely agree, especially with mini wings, speed wings, these kind of things. And in parascending and parachuting, deep stall is actually quite a normal part of their flying maneuvers. They do it all the time.
Yes, Sashu sir, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I had a question. Bruce, I can understand when you say that the shape of the lines, etc., affect, how, or when air escapes from a porous cloth, you can have a deep stall because that affects the shape of the entire wing. Other than adding weight to the wing itself by a lot of water, how does the rain actually affect and cause a deep stall?
I think it's because of the droplets forming on the leading edge. So it makes the leading edge more rough, more less smooth, and this causes the airflow to break away on the leading edge of the glider. And also the reason a porous glider does not fly properly is because the airflow flows out from inside of the glider, and that also stops the air from sticking to the leading edge and forming proper streamlines over the top surface.
Is there any evidence to prove that a shark-nosed glider will be more susceptible to a rain-induced deep stall as compared to a glider, the old style gliders which had huge open fronts and didn't have a dipping nose?
No, I would say it would be the other way around. The shark-nosed gliders are actually better at deep stall recovery. They're better at avoiding the deep stall than the old-fashioned gliders.
Thanks, Bruce.
I think what also adds, maybe, I don't know, like, when the glider gets wet, there's a bit of collection of water at the trailing edge, and that trailing edge gets heavy, and it's like, changing the angle a bit. Seems like maybe having an effect, adding to the effect.
Yeah, there was a story a few years ago of a pilot that flew in heavy snow, and the whole glider started to fill up with snow, and it all went to the trailing edge, and in the end he just stalled. But I've flown in snow more recently, and actually there's very little air that goes into the gliders nowadays because the openings are really small and the glider is well pressurized. So there's not much goes in. And so I've flown in snow more recently, and more or less no snow goes into the glider at all.
And I think there's also an improvement in the fabric. It's going towards becoming more and more waterproof as well.
Yeah. Okay, let's carry on to the next. So this is another one of my pet topics. Is I say, what is wrong here? And the answer is that she has her hands completely through the brake handles, and the brake handles are around her wrists. And I think this is not to be advised, because you heard me earlier on talking about deep stall. With the deep stall, you have to be able to fully put your hands up and fully release the brakes. And if you've got the brake handle around your wrist, then automatically you're pulling on an extra 10 centimeters of brake. And it's very hard to fully put your hands all the way up. And it's really important for a lot of maneuvers that you're able to fully release the brakes. So the other thing is that the thumb actually stops the brake handle from coming up and over your hand. So that can be a problem, first of all, if you want to release the brakes, but secondly, if you want to throw your rescue or something like that. So for several reasons, I think that flying with your hands completely looped through the brake handles is not advisable. Now I'm talking here about the safe brake position for SIV. This is one of the things you learn when you go on an SIV course, is that in order for the glider to recover, that you should either have no brake on or have a lot of brake on. And just to have a tiny amount of brake, 10 or 15 centimeters of brake is actually the worst position. And this is another reason why putting your hands on the brake handles is bad, because you cannot fully release the brakes. So the reason that having a small amount of brake on is bad in SIV is because it makes the profile more pitch unstable. So it actually makes the glider shoot more. So if you're coming out of any maneuvers, the glider will shoot a lot more. And the other thing is it will stop a glider from recovering from deep stall or recovering from full stall as well. So generally, when you're doing SIV, if you have just a little bit of brake on, it's the worst thing you can do. And this is something that you have to be careful of, because a lot of pilots are used to just flying with a little bit of brake on the whole time. And I try to, I show this slide and I try to emphasize that you should not get in the habit of always flying with just a little bit of brake on and feeling comfortable with that. You should, fly with brake off and with brake on and constantly change your brake settings. And another reason why flying with the loops is bad, because if you've got the loop on the wrist, then it's automatically very easy to fly with a little bit of brake on the whole time. And it's just not advisable. So this is the same slide in the same things, the same points that I just went through a moment ago. So here we have an accident in a tandem accident. And this guy, he's exactly doing the problem which I talked about. You can see that he accidentally stalls the glider from some wing overs, and then he doesn't go fully hands up. And that's the reason why the glider doesn't refly again. But in this case, I don't think he has loops on his brakes. Let's just watch it. You can see he's not got loops on his brakes, but he's actually holding the top of the brake handle. It's okay to hold the top of the brake handle as long as you're ready to put your hands all the way up. Now he starts to do some wing overs. Passengers smiling, taking a selfie video, very nice. And then he holds the brake down a bit too long. See, he's still holding the brakes at the top of the brake handle. He's holding brake on the whole time. I'm sure if really he'd gone to the bottom of the brake handle, let the brake go all the way up, the glider would have reflown. So it really didn't look, it really looked like the glider would have reflown if he'd only just gone with the brakes all the way up. So he was, you can see quite clearly in the video that he's actually got his hands holding where the swivels are at the top of the brake handle. And yeah, he never lets the brakes go all the way up. So then we have a second stall accident. This actually happened to a friend of mine. Okay, this is another tandem flight. So the first thing they do is they put the trimmers in the slow position. She's also holding the brake above the brake handle, and then she takes a wrap as well. So she's already got a lot of brake on, and then she takes a wrap as well. And then she's going into the wind gradient close to the ground. So she starts to go into a stall and doesn't put the hands up. Should be the immediate reaction as you start to go back to put your hands up. It's actually a counterintuitive. It's a counterintuitive thing because when the glider stalls and it drops back, your first reaction is to put your hands down, and that's actually the worst thing you can possibly do. It's a bit like the deep stall accident we looked at the beginning. So what you absolutely must do, and the glider gets slow and starts to stall, first thing to do, hands straight up, and both those incidents show the same problem. This is another interesting video. This is from California.
Here we have a pilot who's putting speed bar on, and then he suddenly releases the speed bar. So here you can see the glider pitches forward strongly, and he seems to go into a full stall. His brakes are well down, and the glider is spinning in a kind of helicopter maneuver, which is what causes all the problems with the twists. By this stage, there's really nothing he can do. He's all twisted up. All he can do is throw it reserve. Look at the low altitude as well. Let's go over the whole thing in slow motion now. So our pilot has got speed bar on at the moment, and he suddenly releases the speed bar. There his legs come in, and the glider would pitch back when that happens. Then the glider surges forward strongly, and the pilot pulls his brakes quite hard. You can see the brake line on the left-hand side of the frame there, and you can see that his hands are close to the bottom of the risers. So this is what's causing the glider to spin. So once his risers are so twisted up, there's nothing he can do really. Look at the brake there, it's just floating around. And because there's so many twists, the brakes are locked in position, so there's nothing he can do. I love this bit as the glider just floats past the pilot, narrowly missing him. He's very low now, so it's really time to throw the reserve.
Okay, this is quite an interesting video. I've obviously watched this video about 50 times myself, and I've actually changed my opinion of what the original cause of the accident was. I think that it was caused by the pilot letting go of the speed bar too quickly. Because what happens is if you're on speed bar and you're flying down a glide slope of maybe 7 or 8 to 1, and then if you suddenly release the speed bar, then suddenly the nose wants to lift up, and it changes the incidence to a negative angle of attack, causing the glider to get a frontal. And I've actually seen this in 2 or 3 occasions, as well as in this occasion as well. So I think it only happens on certain gliders, but if you actually very, very quickly release the speed bar, then it can cause the glider to get a front collapse. Okay, here's another subject, dust devils. This is something which is very avoidable normally. Because you're on launch, you can minimize the time you have when you're attached to the glider. And you should look out for what kind of conditions cause dust devils. So there's 3 essential ingredients for dust devils. It's sunshine, light wind or nil wind, and lee side conditions. And whenever I'm out on the hill and suddenly there's no wind, I start to look around and I think, you better look out for a dust devil. And this is an interesting one because this is in Norway. It's a dust devil that actually kicks off in the shade. And it's this girl that just went out of screen who gets injured. She's not even attached to the glider. She's actually trying to help her boyfriend hold his glider. There's the dust devil. She's trying to hold the glider. You can see she's actually thrown about 10 meters away and lands really badly, breaking her shoulder. Incredible how the force of the dust devil. So this thing about hanging around in your equipment on takeoff or on landing, you must be very, very careful. And in schools and in competitions, both of these are times when people can spend a lot of time clipped into their equipment. This is actually a school, and there's some students behind the takeoff here, waiting to launch. This is just the harness being picked up by the glider. And this is actually a student waiting to take off.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that was quite the pilot was actually quite badly hurt after that. And he was just sitting on the ground waiting to take off. So whenever you're clipped in with all your equipment, clipped into your glider, you really have to be careful. So I would suggest, if you want to take off, you clip in and fly. Don't just sit around forever waiting to fly. You'll notice on this example we just seen that there's quite a bit of wind there. But it does have the other two ingredients, which is sunshine and a little bit of lee side, because you can see the pilot's in the wind, just a little bit in the lee side on the top of the hill. So we had two of the three vital ingredients for dust devils. Okay, that's the second section. I'll stop the share there. We'll go on to Sachin. Sachin, do you get dust devils in Templepilots in your flying school?
Extremely rarely, especially in the month of February when there's a switching time. The wind in the first half is generally from east and second half from the west. So we know that historically, that is the month we are extremely careful with the students. It does happen on the takeoff and it sometimes happens on the landing. But other than that, I haven't seen in other months too much of dust devil activity.
Yeah, dust devils can also be a problem in the landing field. If you're landing in the middle of the day, and you have to be careful not to be landing when there's dust devils around. And it can be very difficult sometimes if you're landing in a very strong thermic area to that you can just get caught in a dust devil when you're going into land. So being able to, avoid landing in a dust devil can be quite important sometimes. There's a very nice video of Anthony Green getting a big collapse in Spain when he lands in the middle of the day and gets hit by a dust devil just before the landing.
So we have a question from Varun. Varun, go ahead, please.
Hi, Bruce.
Hello, Varun.
So my question is, as you talked about the brake position in terms of SIV, that either you keep your hands up or you are applying lots of brakes in different maneuvers. How to translate this information in terms when we are flying, when we are thermaling or flying normally in soaring? Like, as you said, that keeping 10% of brakes can get you prone to pitch instability. So being pitch unstable, what do you recommend in terms of brake application when we are thermaling? For example, if suppose the glider is turning to the right, what do we do with the outer hand? How much brake do we apply? And even in terms of like if we are transitioning and not using speed brakes, so how do we use the brakes in those situations?
Okay, thanks very much for this question. It's a very important question. It's not so easy to answer in just a few words. Because you need to use the brakes to control the pitch as well. I would say that you have to use the brakes in order to control the pitch, but a better pilot will use less brake to control the pitch than a lower level pilot. And one example of this is that if a glider is, let's say it's surging forward and you don't want it to surge forward, if you are a very experienced pilot and you can react very fast, then you can probably get away with just putting 5 centimeters of brake on. But if you wait 1 second more, then you need to put 20 or 30 centimeters of brake to have the same reaction. So it's very difficult to just say exactly what is the right amount of brake and the wrong amount of brake. One other thing which I should have said really about SIV and using a lot of brake is that in SIV it's useful to put a lot of brake, but only for a very short amount of time. just put a lot of brake only for 1 second and then release it again. Because most of the time you're trying to get out of maybe a glider which is shooting or a cravat, or, you know, there's many different times you need to use a lot of brake. But if you hold a lot of brake, then you do a stall and cause more problems. So it's actually a really useful trick to use a lot of brake, but only for 1 second, because the glider doesn't have time to stall, and you can actually use more brake and then release it than if you had a brake and held it in the position.
And could you please throw some more light on the continuous use of some amount of brake to keep in touch with the glider? And also, as I asked you, suppose we are thermaling and the outer hand, how do we use the outer brake?
Yeah, it also depends on the glider. You know, I would use a little bit about, you know, I would try to use the minimal amount of outer brake on when you're thermaling. And when you are gliding, I think it's important when you're flying to decide if you're either thermaling or you're gliding to go somewhere else. So when you're gliding to go somewhere, then you don't put any brake on, and you might use some speed bar as well. You shouldn't use brake when you have the speed bar on, because it stops the speed. You know. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can put some brake on, perhaps just to stop a surge or to stop turbulence, or use back riser steering. But basically, when you're thermaling, you're using brake to thermal and climb. And when you're going somewhere to look for the next thermal, then you should be using no brake. So the point I'm trying to make is that you shouldn't just fly around all the time with the same amount of brake. You should either have brake on or brake off.
Got it. I got your point. That's why the question.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, I think we can move to the next section. We are 1 hour down into the session. So
okay, we're already 1 hour on, are we?
Yes.
Okay, we go on to the design part of the talk. So some people think that you can design paragliders just by running a computer program, but this is actually far from the truth. There's lots of different computer programs, but there's actually 2 completely different types of program. One is analysis programs, and these programs enable you to analyze the aerofoil and analyze certain features of the design, but they don't design a glider for you. And then the other type is CAD programs. And I use Glider Plan, which is a commercially available program, and anybody can buy it. You just have to pay 5,000 euros a year for a license. This is X-foil. You can see the change in angle of attack of the glider. This is one of the most classic aerofoil analysis programs. I would say that every paraglider designer is familiar with this program and uses it. But what it enables you to do is predict, for example, if you are going to get a front collapse. Well, you can see on the left-hand side the arrows going in, showing that at lower angle of attack, you get a front collapse. So you might look at 2 different profiles, and one profile will take more negative incidents than another profile. So that's what it helps you to do. This is Fluent. This is a 3D analysis program, which works. It gives you the airflow over any shape. But there's actually a problem with this kind of program. I mean, people have been using these kind of programs for a long time. It works for modeling cars, for aeroplanes, and things like that. But for a paraglider, it really doesn't work very well at all, because the shape of the wing is completely rigid. And the problem we have in paragliding is that the shape of the wing makes the airflow over it, but the airflow makes the shape of the wing. And we have this circular problem going on the whole time. And this is really what's made paragliders so complicated to design. And over the last few years, we've been working on a much more sophisticated program, which shows you how this circular problem that I'm talking about, you know, that the airflow creates the shape of the wing, and then the shape of the wing creates the airflow. This is one of a model of that I'm about to show you. The model on a 4-cell kite. So it's a very, very small, simple kite. And you can see how impressive and difficult it is to calculate the airflow and the shape of the kite as well. That's this one. You can see the airflow, you can see how the kite is changing shape, and then also the shape of the kite is changing completely the airflow above it as well. So this is really, you know, it's just a huge step forward in technology, which is really beginning to look at the true complexity of a paraglider, you know, which is really so much more complex than any rigid shape. Again, this is another exercise we've been working on simulating cloth. This is a simulation of a flag flapping in the wind. Of course, if you used X-foil or Fluent, you just wouldn't get any results at all with this. It would just show you a straight piece of cloth that says straight and has no drag and no lift and doesn't do anything. But the reality, you know, is you can see this model here is actually, you know, pretty close to what a flag looks like when it's blowing in the wind. And so you can begin to appreciate the complexity of a paraglider and how any computer program that you want to use for designing a paraglider has to be able to take into account these incredibly complicated forces and shapes and the way the cloth interacts with the airflow. So it's really very, very exciting right now that we can actually, you know, due to new super high technology and extremely powerful computers, we can actually start to use these kind of programs. Well, we're having to design our own, to write our own computer program to analyze both the flag and the kite, and we're beginning to analyze the paragliders as well. This is the same thing. This is the airflow over the flag on running the new simulation program, Alula. So because we're able to model the way the cloth bends and flaps, and even we're able to model when the flag touches itself, this means that in future we might even get to modeling the way collapses behave. So this is how our design process works at the moment. I think you have the same kind of design processes for most products. We start with some market research. Perhaps, you know, the marketing guys say, oh, we need a new EMB glider. Our EMB is a bit old. So then we go into our ideas and analysis, which comes from these computer programs. We've just been looking at it. And then we design a new proto using glider plan. Then we send the glider off to Sri Lanka, where all our gliders are made. And then we receive a glider back by FedEx and then test the prototype. And then we go around this cycle many, many times until we're completely satisfied with the glider. The record is 30 times I've had for this whole cycle. It was actually 28 times for the Omega 8. I think that was our complete record for the number of prototypes we made. And then afterwards we certify the glider and then go into production. This is glider plan. So this is the program. I think this program is the most popular program from all glider manufacturers. It's a guy in Australia that wrote this program called, his name is Dave Aberdeen. And I think that he's one of the best paid guys in paragliding because nearly every brand is using his program. And also all the kitesurf brands also use a program which he makes called Surf Plan. So overall, you know, he does very well for himself. This is a little slide showing a summary of the way gliders have evolved over the last 20 years. You start back in 1990 with the Black Magic was the first glider I made, and it had this kind of construction. Then in 1995, we had a similar construction, but with cells that were smaller and larger, and we used the bottom surface as a kind of diagonal rib. This was on the Alto, we had this design. And then we go for the first diagonal ribs back in 2000. We made the XMX like that. In fact, I think it was 97 we used that construction. And then the last type of construction, which is more competition gliders, have this kind of thing now. And the overall trend is to have less lines and a smoother sail. So we got less lines, more cells, and a smoother shape with a better defined profile. Here we have a view of the internal structure of a glider. This glider is a two-liner, and so you can see that this structure is actually pretty heavy inside this glider, because it's got, every cell has a diagonal rib inside it, and the diagonal ribs don't have any holes in them either. So this is actually a very heavy internal structure. And here is a much lighter internal structure. This is the Cure 2. And you can see that there's a lot less material in the glider. So it makes the glider lighter, but the secret is to use the material in the most efficient way to make the structure work as well as you possibly can. Here's another little video on the development of our own program. Here you can see the gliders actually moving and flexing from the loads of the airflow, and this is the same thing. So you can actually predict where the creases will be in the glider, or try to avoid having any creases by adjusting the shape of the sail, the profile, the attachment points. This is another computer prediction of the loads in the sail, and this is very useful, especially for load test and to improve the strength of the glider. Sometimes we put a GoPro in the glider. This is a Magic, and we put the GoPro in the glider to see that the ribs don't have any creases in them, and that the sail is as it should be. You can see there's a crease in the leading edge on the left-hand side there, just behind the plastic. So in this case, we might want to move that plastic a little bit back to avoid getting a crease in that area. This is the launch on a Cure 2 with a GoPro inside. So you can see there's a lot more holes in the sail and a lot of diagonal ribs. And you can see also that the sail is much cleaner, which is typical from having more cells. But also we've been doing a lot more development to clean up the sail and keep everything clean and tight and neat. This is the structure on the Cure 1. And this is the way we design the line layout in Glider Plan. You actually have full flexibility to design absolutely any line layout that you want. You can just draw it in with the computer interface. It's actually very, very easy. On the leading edge of all BGD gliders, we use this CCB panel shaping. So this is a 3D panel shaping. And when we first came out with this was pretty revolutionary, but now I think more or less every brand on the market has some form of 3D panel shaping. But we prefer to use CCB because I think it's the most efficient form of panel shaping on the market. This is a picture back in the 1990s of a Paratech glider. And if you look at the trailing edge at the back there, you can see that it's very, very wobbly and not tight at all. And the reason the modern gliders are not like that is because of panel shaping, also known as sail tension. And this 3D cutout of the glider shows you exactly what I'm talking about. On the right-hand side, there's a trailing edge, which is really slack, and leading edge is also slack. And if you look at the bottom picture, that's the top surface panel, and those dotted lines shows you the way you modify the panels to increase the panel shaping or sail tension. So you can actually adjust the shape. You have to adjust the shape of every single panel in the glider to give you a tight leading edge and a tight trailing edge. And if the sail is not tight, then what actually happens is that the sail each sail reduces in size, which is what happened in that image two images ago with this trailing edge, which was really slack. So you end up with a sail which is not the same shape as you originally designed it. This is a quick sketch of how the forces go from the top surface into the diagonal ribs and then into the line structure of the wing. And this is another GoPro picture I've taken of an Adam with the GoPro inside, and the pilot, we actually had the GoPro on a rail inside the glider, and we could pull a string and pull the GoPro across the wing. And what I wanted to look at here was the shape of the trailing edge mini ribs and how they affect the sail, how they affect the top sail. This is some more details of the sail tension. And just to show you the incredible complexity of the different shapes you can use to change the sail tension. So when you've designed your glider, what happens is you send all the panels to the production. And this is a plot of all the panels for one half of a glider. We always make our gliders symmetrical anyway, so we only ever give one half to the production. If you want to zoom in here, this is the CCBs area on the top surface of the glider. The red lines are the cut lines and the green lines are the sewing lines, just 10 millimeters in from the cut lines. And then when everything is done in development, we go on to certification. And of course, there's two parts of certification: flight tests and load test. This is the shock test, which is the first part of the load test. This is the DHV doing a shock test on the base. They have a steel cable on the ground, which has a weak link in it, connecting to the glider. So there's a massive shock of normally 1,000 kilos, which checks to see that the glider could take the impact of the pilot pulling the full length of the lines and smacking into the glider, and you have to make sure there's no damage whatsoever to the glider. This is the Swiss Federation, Air Turquoise, doing the same thing in Switzerland. This time we're testing WASP, doing the shock test. Yeah, so there's a weak link in the line with 1,000 kilos, and all the glider has to take this shock load of 1,000 kilos. Then the second part of the load test is this static load. So with this, the glider is flying above the truck, and there's a computer with a load cell in the truck, and it measures the load achieved by the glider. And the glider has to be able to take for 3 seconds the maximum, 8 times the maximum load of the wing. It's pretty expensive because we often break gliders, and you don't know if that glider passed or not without looking at the details of the results. And then there's actually 23 flight tests. This is the flight tests of the Cure 2. It's a video we've got on our Facebook.
Air Turquoise does certifications for several manufacturers. Our job is to test the gliders in different configurations and see if they fulfill the requirements of ENC rules.
And we have a nice place here for that because it's a nice altitude and we're not so much wind. That means we can frame the sound out quite well. We are working with Rico, Philippe, Claude, Anselm, Alex, and me. And now Nicole, I asked her to come because it's always a problem with the minimum weight. And for sure, she has a lot to learn.
Yeah, it's a great job. It's always really challenging because there is something to learn every flight, so it's never boring.
We are working on 23 tests, actually. Takeoff, landing, control movement, speed, small front collapse, big front collapse, full speed front collapse, small side collapse, big side collapse, high angle of attack recovery, beeline slow test, develop spin, trim speed, low spin, big gears. Everything should be considered. But for sure, it's more and more demanding to test these gliders. Now we are in education of a few pilots, and it's more and more demanding because it's getting more and more technical. Because the glider is more and more solid.
Every wings will have the same maneuver. We just need a different movement to find the right maneuver, right collapse, how deep it is, depends the wings, tandem, competition wings, spool will be big different for how to collapse. But at the end, we will have the same proportion of the wings. And like that, every wings will have the same test.
The purpose is to classify the gliders in different categories. So you have A, B, C, D, and CCC class. And for each class, you need different skills to fly these gliders. So basically, the A class is the school glider, and the CCC class is the competition class.
This is a part, and after we have the load test. The load test is divided in three parts. The first part is theoretical part, it's a calculation, line calculation, and after we have the physical shock and load test with the same glider. We apply the shock test of normally it's 1,000 kilos on the glider, and after we load the glider at 8 times the maximum weight is given by the manufacturer. We are doing also rescue, flying from onshore, testing rescue on the lake, and the helicopter drop for the flying test of the rescue. Yes, and the Q2, I guess it was one glider, it was not flying fast, and I guess we were quite close to 50, 60, a little bit more, but you know it's difficult. I don't like to speak about the maximum speed because this is always depending about the instrument.
57, 60, 1, 2, 3, 4, 64.
It was fast enough, I think. We test more the stability in high speed.
Level, full speed, and click. Yes, very good.
After we make the maneuver, we check how the wings is able to continue to fly without any action.
But no, I was quite impressed about quite clear it was. It was fitting well in a range in the C category.
It was quite easy to find the right maneuver. Every maneuver was easy to reproduce. It's very important for us. And also every maneuver was very good for the safety, for C-class for sure, but it was a good surprise.
Break, I break, stop working back. And I open the span, I open hands up. Okay. 5, 6, okay. Stop 7, 6, 5. On top. Okay. I take the spiral. To 5. Okay. Very good. I go. Direction has control.
So that's my last slide. That's the end of the talk. This is just different videos from around some of the activities we've been going through at BGD in the last year. Always a lot of things. This is Kossen, May 2019. Always a lot of things going on.
Okay, so any last questions?
Yeah. I got a couple.
Okay. Bruce, you're okay to take some questions?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks, firstly, Bruce. That was an extremely informative talk. I have a couple of questions. I'll try and club them into one because it's possible you may be able to answer them all in one go. So the questions that I have is, firstly, can you simulate collapses when you do your data design on the software?
Not at the moment. At the moment, we cannot simulate the collapses. No.
Not simulate collapses.
It's a target for the future.
Right. And then other question is, in most collapses, you find it's the tips of the glider that start distorting. So when you have a frontal collapse, or when you have a full collapse, or asymmetric collapse, what do you do as far as design is concerned to ensure better tip inflation? Because the openings are smaller naturally, so the air goes lesser there. From a design point of view, what do you do to keep them better inflated?
It's actually the other way around. We try to make it so that the tips collapse more easily than the center, because it's safer that way. Yes, because if the center collapses first, then you get a massive collapse and the whole glider, you crash if the center collapses first. But if the tips collapse first, then this is a warning to the pilot that he's in turbulent air, and the pilot can control it normally quite easily, and then he can fly away to a safer place. So we use the tips collapsing first as an indicator to help the pilot to make the right decisions in his flying.
Right. And the last one was, I noticed in the first diagram you showed where the airfoil was changing its angle of attack, and you could see the pressure lines indicating, increase in pressure, decrease in pressure, etc. But I didn't notice any change in the trailing edge profile. So when you do modeling like this, and naturally we are flying with the application of brakes, which is distorting the profile at the trailing edge, can you simulate that to see the change in the dynamics of the pressure on top and bottom?
This program which we're using in that image is called X-Foil, and it very quickly breaks down when you use much brake. You can use a little bit of brake, maybe 20 centimeters, and after that, the program just crashes. So this is also one thing which we're working on a lot, is improving the simulation for having brakes on. But right now, the simulation is not good with brakes on. So the only way, when we don't have a simulation which works properly, then we have to do it with test flying, and we have to make a prototype, go and test fly it, and then get the results from this. But when we have a simulation that works, then we can perhaps go through that process in a much quicker and cheaper way.
Thanks, Bruce.
Okay, I just read a question, a personal one. Someone asking you, I think Prashant, what made you, make a shift from being a paragliding pilot to also becoming a designer?
Well, first of all, I became a full-time competition pilot. I got a sponsor and joined the British team and got a sponsor to fly full-time. So this is what stopped me being an engineer, civil engineer originally. And then after I did competition flying for Airwave, I started to do half-time competition flying, and the rest of the time I was doing development. So it's been development and competition flying always goes hand in hand, because to win the competitions, we wanted to make better gliders. So this has always been, competition flying and development has always been completely hand in hand. So perhaps not so much now because of the change in regulations where you're not allowed to fly prototypes. But for most of my career, I've been flying competitions and developing gliders during the competition.
Avi Viz left, but he had one question, so I'll quickly ask the question. It was about dust devils. So is there a way to survive flying into a dust devil by mistake? They are not visible at higher levels.
Yeah, it's very difficult to avoid flying into a dust devil. Sometimes they have dust in them, and so you can see them. But if you have a landing area which is prone to dust devils, and you want to know where there's going to be a dust devil, then what I do is a good trick is to look at the windsock and to see, obviously you can see if the airflow is laminar and smooth just with a bit of wind, or if the windsock is getting ripped up in a dust devil. So I try to look very carefully at the windsock, and when the air is laminar, then I go in and quickly try and make my landing approach and the landing close to the windsock when the air is clearly smooth.
Okay. But if by mistake, if you go in, I think you just try to keep your wing open. And
yeah, obviously you need to try to keep your wing open and avoid the dust. But the best is to avoid going into the dust devil in the first place.
Oh, of course, yes. One more question from me, Bruce. I've been flying links for last 2-3 years. My best flying has happened on this glider, and it's very benign, and I never felt unsafe. I always felt very safe under it. I used to fly Delta 2, which had the tendency to bite into a thermal.
Which one?
Delta 2.
Delta 2, yes.
Yeah. So I just want to understand from the designer's point of view, how do you differentiate this ability that, okay, I want this glider to really bite into a thermal and I don't want. So I just want to understand your point of view on this.
Yeah, it all depends on the aerodynamic profile that you choose and the pitching moment of the profile. So this is one thing you can do with the X-foil. You can see different profiles, and you can see the pitching moment, and you can see whether a profile that will bite into the thermal or a glider with profile which will hang back from a thermal. It's quite well understood from this X-foil characteristics of a glider from the pitching moment.
Okay, so this is something you define it, like you can decide that, yes. Okay, I don't want this. Yeah. Okay, understood. Cool. Avi, one more last question. This is for all the club community here, because most of the pilots are thinking of buying either BGD Magic or Epic. And when you see the specification, they are fairly, if you look at the trim, you look at the glide, more or less, these both gliders are similar. So
yes, that's right.
How would you differentiate a number of flights, number of hours on that front? How could you differentiate this so that we can give better recommendations?
To me, for normal flying, the Magic is better because the performance is about the same, but you have better safety on the Magic because it's an ENA glider. But the advantage for the Epic is especially good for as a freestyle glider. So if you want to do freestyle, then definitely the Epic is a really good option. The Epic is a very good glider to start to learn to do acro on. So this is, for me, the advantage of the Epic is this freestyle characteristics, and the advantage for the Magic, it's better as a standard glider, I would say, you're better to take the Magic because it offers a better compromise of safety and performance.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so I think we've gone well past, our planned time. And
yes, talking too much, you should just shut me up.
We can never have enough of, this knowledge as pilots. So on behalf of everyone present here and all those who are watching on, YouTube Live, I would like to say a very hearty, thank you to you.
Thank you very much, Avi. Nice to speak to you.
Thanks for, our paragliding world more colorful. And thanks also, for contributing in such a big way to our, paragliding world and a better future with better